Do mocks matter? That's an age-old question that's been debated longer than I can remember. In fact, I remember sitting in year 12 with my friends a couple of weeks before our mocks debating this exact same topic, whether or not mocks mattered. That's why by the end of this video, you'll know whether or not mocks matter and how you could approach them to maximize the likelihood that you get the top grades. Firstly though, let me tell you a story. Since most of you are currently doing your GCSEs or A-levels, in 2020, you were probably in year 9 or below. But in 2020, during COVID, I was in year 10, which means the GCSE and A-level scene was a bit different. Since COVID or lockdown happened around 2 months before the scheduled exams, that meant that teachers and exam boards had to rely on previous unit tests and mocks that the students did to calculate a predicted grade for each student. However, those students did their mocks thinking that they're not going to contribute towards their grades because they didn't know that COVID and lockdown was going to happen. Let's try thinking about that more deeply. Let's say in 2020, you were in year 11 and you had January mocks. And you thought to yourself, you know what, mocks don't really matter, so I'm not going to put that much effort in, and you end up getting 5s and 6s. But you're not too bothered because at the end of the day, mocks don't really matter. I'll just lock in for the actual exam, right? Well, fast forward a couple of months to March, and guess what? The government and the exam boards announced that your final exam is going to be based on previous mocks and unit tests that you did. Those exact same mocks that you did thinking that they're not going to contribute to your grades, so you didn't put that much effort in. Now, this actually happened. I was in year 10, but I remember hearing horror stories from the year above about people that got screwed over with their grades. Now, I'm not really trying to fearmonger. And let's be honest, no one could really anticipate a global pandemic that will hinder your likelihood of doing a final exam. However, you never really know. Now, that's not the only reason why mocks matter. There is another reason, and it will apply to you, whether there's a global pandemic or not. But before I tell you that reason, if you're a GCSE or A-level student that wants to get the top grades with only an hour of studying per day and no tutors required, then you need to listen up. Over the past 2 years, I've helped tens of thousands of students just like you make that jump from studying a lot per day and not really seeing any results to only needing an hour of studying per day and getting the top grades. Now, I've compiled everything that you need from step A to Z to get the top grades in your GCSEs or A-levels in the ultimate guide to acing your GCSEs and A-levels. You firstly get the video program. It's a comprehensive guide that covers everything that you need to get the top grades. Everything from how to craft efficient studying techniques for each subject, a flashcards masterclass, a notes masterclass, a doing practice questions masterclass, and also lessons and modules about often overlooked factors like external revision and the lifestyle optimization that you need to do to get the top grades. Now we also offer a new service, a personalized, science-based study plan just for you. All you need to do is tell us what subjects you're taking and we'll create an efficient study plan suitable just for you. You don't need to waste time and effort with trial and error trying to figure out what studying technique works. We'll just give you the studying techniques. In fact, exams are just around the corner. There's no time to waste. And don't take it from me. Look at these students that have taken the program and found insane benefits. So if you want to get the top grades in your GCSEs or A-levels with only an hour of studying per day and no tutor required, then click the first link in the description. Now, why do mocks actually matter? Well, the main reason is to get a feel of what the actual exam is going to be like. If you're currently doing your GCSEs, that probably means you've never sat an official exam before. And if you're in year 12 or year 13, that means that you probably did your GCSEs, but you still don't know what an A-level feels like. An A-level that's going to decide whether or not you're going to go to uni. And so no matter how many unit tests you do or how many practice papers you do on your own, you're never going to really get a feel of what the actual exam is going to be like, except with a well-executed mock. And anyone can attest to this. So if your only chance to get a feel of the exam is a mock, why would you then slack off for that mock? Why would you not treat it like the actual exam? And so that's why mocks matter. That being said though, how do we approach them in a way that's going to maximize the likelihood that we get the top grades? Well, like I said before, you should treat mocks like the actual exam. So by that logic, you should approach them in the exact same way you would approach the actual exam. How do you do that? Well, if you want a comprehensive answer, first link in the description. However, there is a 3-step process that I'll briefly explain. Step 1, break up each subject into the 3 elements: problem solving, essay writing, and memorization. I've put a short free PDF guide that explains exactly how to do this in the second link in the description, includes a Venn diagram as well. However, you just take each subject and place it on the Venn diagram, and based on its position, you can know exactly what studying techniques you need to use to create an efficient study routine for that subject. So now that we understand the composition of each subject, step 2 is to find the efficient studying techniques that we're going to use to study for each subject based on its composition. Now, there's one thing that you need to keep into consideration when you're crafting those efficient studying techniques, and that is make sure that everything that you do while studying is active. But what is active revision? Well, there's active and passive revision. The difference is very simple. If you're interacting with the content, if you're interacting with the information, then it's active studying. If not, then it's passive. For example, reading a textbook. Is it active or passive? Well, you're kind of just reading. You're not actually doing anything with the information, so it's passive. However, let's say that instead of just reading, you're going to take the information in the textbook and summarize it into notes. That then becomes active because you're taking the information, interacting with it, changing it up a little bit so that it's in your own words, and then making notes out of it. Same thing with watching free science lessons, for example. If you're just watching the video, you're not actually going to learn anything. However, if you take the video, turn it into flashcards, then you're now interacting with the information, so it becomes active. I'm sure you get the idea. Now, why use active revision? Well, I could get into the studies of why active revision actually helps you get the top grades. However, this is how I like to think about it. You need to prove to your brain that the content that you're revising is important. Now, we have limited capacity in our brains. Of course, some people more than others. However, we don't memorize every single thing that we come across because we have limited capacity. And so how does your brain decide whether or not to store information? Well, we don't just say, hey brain, store this information, it's important. Instead, if we come across information a lot and we interact with that information, your brain starts picking up the signal that, you know what, this information is probably quite important. Think about it. Have you ever forgotten your parents' name, for example? No, because you see them a lot, you interact with their name a lot, and so on. And so when we're revising, it's not enough to just read a textbook, because to your brain, that's just the same as reading a book or reading a billboard. It's not enough for your brain to actually realize that, you know what, this information is important. However, if you take that information, you start summarizing it, or you turn it into flashcards, or you start testing yourself on it, you start blurting, for example, and then you do that often so that you're also implementing spaced repetition, your brain starts realizing that, you know what, this information is quite important. I should probably store it. Now that's step 2. Step 3 is optimizing the studying session itself. How long you should study for, where you should study, should you study with friends, what time of the day you should study. All of those I made videos about. You can just check those videos out. But you don't only optimize the studying session itself. You also need to optimize the rest of your lifestyle. There are things that you do throughout the day that aren't studying. However, they're going to directly impact your revision. For example, the most important one is sleep. There's also caffeine intake, exercise, your diet. All of that stuff is going to directly affect your studying, even though it's not necessarily a revision. Now, that was a brief summary of why mocks are important and how you should approach them if you're trying to get the top grades. Remember, mocks are as close to the actual exam as you're going to get, so try to treat them like the actual exam. And if you want to guarantee the top grades in your GCSEs or A-levels, click the first link in the description and get the ultimate guide to acing your GCSEs and A-levels.